Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are in episode 3 of season 4 of Bungo Stray Dogs. And I'm very curious because last episode, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't feeling good. When I watched last episode, I was like right in the middle of my cold. I'm on the tail end of it now, so I feel a lot better. But last episode, I feel like my brain, not that it was foggy, but I feel like everything in that episode all happened at once, and I couldn't quite process it. And so going back, it's like, okay, clearly Natsumi and something is being set up. The police officer is taking Ranpo away. Shady as hell. Something's going on. Fukuzawa is trying to figure out with the playwright what's going on. And meanwhile, some actor, as Sarah Linda pointed out in the comments, was trying to have us watch their snuff film. So lots of things were happening in the last episode. And I feel better now. So going into this third episode, I feel a little bit more rejuvenated. Like, okay, I'm not like bogged down in the middle of a cold trying to process the mysterious ways of Bungo Stray Dogs. Because this series, it likes to give you a lot of mysterious elements and present lots of like what if scenarios, and then you have to wait until the actual events play out to see how things end up, right? So I got off work today and was like, no, I'm ready to watch episode 3. I can't wait. So I do have a lot of comments though before we start. So I want to dive right into those from episodes 1 and episodes 2. Both K.A. and Ifat Bustrashi talked about that the VA for Tokyo, Murakami, who's the actor who had the main idea of wanting to be an actor here, his VA is the same as Dobby's from My Hero Academia, which I thought was pretty interesting. I thought that was really cool. Non-binary Jutlung had a lot of information to share about the in real life. Ranpo was actually unemployed after the 1923 earthquake in Japan and wrote a lot during that time alongside the real life Fukuzawa, and quoted Fukuzawa as being one of the reasons why he's improved as a writer. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I like that there's a connection between the real life Ranpo and the real life Fukuzawa. That's really nice. Additionally, the phrase, the day is a dream, the night is the reality, is one that the real life Ranpo would actually write alongside his signature at autograph signings. I think that's perfect. And then Sekai Genkijo which was the thing that was above the stage during the play. It basically translates to saying the world theater. Going along with Shakespeare, all the world's a stage. I was like, of course. And then Tokyo Murakami, it was theorized by non-binary Jutlung that they're not a real author. I didn't want to look him up until the very end of this little arc because I'd be afraid I'd get spoilers. So, but apparently they're not a real author, but they could be like Ace from season 3 and be based on the author Haruki Murakami, and in which Tokyo might actually come from Murakami's novel, Norwegian Wood, aka Tokyo Blues. So I thought that was pretty cool, right? If we do get any new characters, I will look up information on them. You all don't have to comment about them. Please spoiler tag if you do. I don't want to read any comments about author information because if they are, I'm going to look them up whenever the arc or the episode's over, if that makes sense. That's what I've done the past seasons, so don't feel the need to give me anything unless it's something really quirky or outlandish. But don't worry, I will research the authors. I just didn't want to do it for Tokyo because I was going to wait till this arc was over. But y'all, you kind of ruined that. So, I'm joking. You didn't spoil anything. But just keep that in mind for future episodes. All right? PMJ, actually, like, everybody was commenting about the taxi cab, the actor saying he was going to become a taxi cab driver. It sounded familiar in the episode. I was like, I've heard this before, but I couldn't remember where I heard it from. And then, like, 20 people, PMJ was the first, noted that the guy that said he wants to be a taxi driver when he grew up, he could end up being the cab driver in episode 6 of season 1 of the As Your Messenger. It's not confirmed, but it could be the case. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I liked that a lot. Scarlet Camellia said that outside the theater, you can actually see in episode 1 the construction of 5 tall black buildings. And I'm like, okay. Like previewing the whole Port Mafia and everything getting built. Of course, I thought that was neat. Kaylin V talked about a lot. I liked Kaylin V's comment about this series does do a lot of focus on the impact of losing parents. And when you grow up without parents or a family, the found family is a big theme with this show, but it also highlights like the impact parents have. And so Kaylin V's comment, talks a lot about how Ranpo kind of gets in this like repressed childlike state, like the whole eating the candy all the time, getting that instant gratification, like wanting to get praised and stuff like that reward aspect, and talks about how Rampo's personality could be influenced by the fact that he lost his parents young. And I'm like, yeah, a lot of the characters in this show lost their parents, usually at a young age, and Fukuzawa has to create the adoption agency to take them all in. So I thought that was really good comment to note, Kaylin. Alexander Q talked about how the theater building, they were like, does the theater building become the agency? Because Ranpo talked about, the theater might have to be shut down if there was a murder involved. I don't know. They said later on, they replied after I wrote this down, that they didn't think the theater looked like the agency. It was just maybe an offhanded guess. They haven't read the novels, so I don't know. But we'll see where that goes. And then Sarah Linda was positing some theories. Again, I get very hesitant to read them because I don't want to be spoiled, but you all saying you've not read the novel, I'm taking your word, so hopefully y'all are telling the truth. But Sarah Linda's like, I'm just theorizing, but maybe the playwright was implying that there was a group of gifted users that were hunting others. And I'm like, well, that's kind of happened this entire series where we've had different groups of gifted users versus gifted users, so that wouldn't surprise me, but I'm not sure. And then Sarah Linda did point out a really good point. When Natsumi's taken away, why didn't he just turn into a cat? But again, if you don't want the world to know that you're a gifted user, and if you want to just seem like a regular person, turning into a cat would be a pretty dead giveaway that you're gifted. So maybe Natsumi doesn't want to do that. Maybe he doesn't want to give away that he has an ability. Maybe that has to do with it. I don't know. And is he trying to lead Ranpo and Fukuzawa towards something? I don't know. We know that Natsumi ends up being the one that gives the idea of the agency to Fukuzawa. So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to think that, but there's lots of mysteries, lots of holes. I do think the police officer, total sketch, definitely doing something. And I'm curious to see what that actually is. So in any case, we are not going to waste any more time. Thank you all so much for the comments. I really appreciate them, but let's dive into this episode, shall we? We are going to start Bungo Stray Dogs Season 4, Episode 3. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Yeah. I'm kind of sad because I'll be honest. I love the Dark Era because it's 4 episodes and it's set up so perfectly to encapsulate like everything in those 4 episodes, and there's like such breathing room. And the Azure Messenger and the episode before it covering Dazai's entrance exam, those were only 2 episodes, so that felt really short, and there's a lot left out of the novels with those adaptations. And then with Chuya and Dazai's backstory, it's condensed down to 3. There's stuff left out of that, and I definitely want to go and read the Untold Origin story now. I definitely want to go read that, and so that may be something that once season 4 is over, I want to go back and read and talk to you all about. But if I get time, I might read it during season 4 while this is going on. It'll just depend on if I get time to read it. But I definitely want to read it now, especially knowing we're going back to the present. But I'm really honestly very sad that we're only doing 3 episodes because I feel like they could have done a 4th. I feel like there's a part of me that wants to see the origins of the detective agency being built from the ground up. There's a part of me that wants to see that I'm like, oh, come on, you could show it to us. It's fine, but they're not going to do that, damn it. And that's so frustrating, right? So there's a part of me that wants to see it, and then there's a part of me that's like, okay, no, you'll find out later, but it's very frustrating. Very frustrating indeed. And I know that I don't want to know go during this discussion. I'm probably going to bring up theories and ideas. I don't want them confirmed or deconfirmed. And I don't want information from the novel yet. I want to be able to go back and read it and be surprised myself and talk to you all about the surprises. So I don't want to know about that necessarily. I don't want to know about Fjordor and the 5 yet, because I'm sure that, especially Fjordor being involved, I wondered why we were doing Fukuzawa and Ranpo specifically to start off this season. What was the point of it? Because with Chuya and Dazai, it makes sense because we touched base on them in season 3. And season 2, the Dark Era, makes total sense because Dazai is a big part of it, and his whole connection to Oda is central to his connection to Atsushi and Kyoko later on. But I was wondering why Fukuzawa and Ranpo's story? Why start out season 4 with them? And then the moment Fyodor shows up on the roof, it's like, oh, we're going to tie back to that this season. Gotcha. Thanks, Bungo Stray Dogs. It all makes sense now, right? I love that. And it kind of makes sense too. It's not really, I feel like they can get away with showing Fyodor at the end of this episode, and that it would make sense in the graphic novel, because in the manga, we're introduced to Fyodor like as soon as we're introduced to Fitzgerald. Agatha Christie and Fyodor are introduced at the same time as Fitzgerald. So the fact that he's in the novel isn't surprising, because we've technically already met him, and we technically meet him at the end of season 2, and then we meet him in season 3. So that part's not surprising. But man, the moment he's just on the rooftop and he's just there. And now knowing that he's talking about 5 is the group. 5 is the group of gifted. And it says the opening, the angels shall bring to true death upon the performers. So the idea that I'm getting from it, again, I'm theorizing. Please do not tell me if I'm right or wrong. If you've read the manga, I don't want to know your theories, because they will influence my thoughts going into this series. We can talk about it at the end of the season, or as the episodes play out. But obviously the performers are, because the one guy, Jun Minamura, was talking about that there were gifted that were evil that needed to be eradicated. And Rampo's like, what, by other gifted? That's a bit hypocritical. And that's when Minamura got mad. I tried to look up Minamura after I stopped the discussion. I tried to look up Minamura as a Japanese author to see if I saw anything, but there was like 4 or 5 different Minamuras, and I was like, And so all I did was put Minamura BSD in the search engine, and it showed like a page, and it was like a preview, and it said Jun Minamura in Bungo Stray Dogs, and that's all I read, so I know nothing else. I just know his name was Jun Minamura, but I didn't want to click on the link because I was afraid I'd be spoiled. So I tried to find some author information, couldn't exactly find it, so we'll wait until the end of the season, and then I'll look more into it, or when we do the novel, I'll look more into it too. But Minamura brings up the conversation like he wanted Ranpo to join the group to eliminate the gifted, like that they were like the it reads very cultish, that they're the chosen ones, chosen to eradicate the other gifted to make the world a better place. That lines up exactly with Fyodor, who seems to want to get rid of gifted individuals. And we'll talk about this episode as we walk through it. But the opening crawl here that says the angel shall bring true death upon the performers, it makes it sound like Fyodor is part of the angels and the other gifted are the performers. They're not the real gifted, and they need to be eradicated. Totally lines out with Fyodor's persona and what we know about him. And the idea of Fyodor putting himself in the position of an angel makes total sense. It all makes sense now. Especially, the thing about it is, I'm assuming Fyodor is the one that murdered the playwright, or at least he was tied to someone that could do that, so that's interesting. But yeah, this whole thing with Ranpo, where he's like, you and your bodyguard would make an excellent duo, and Rampo's like, well, he doesn't work with strangers. He's like, he works alone, right? He's afraid of strangers. And he's like, you just met him, but you know him so well. And Rampo's like, yeah, I just met you, and I know that you're tricking me. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to see through the truth, don't you? And he's like, though, you don't believe that, do you? He's like, you question whether I have a gift or not. And he goes through everything, right? And so the part that's creepy about this opening crawl, when Ranpo is basically solving the mystery. I mean, one, it's amazing that Rampo's like, okay, you want me to prove that I'm gifted? Because, now he believes it since Fukuzawa has created this monster. He's like, I get a front row seat to the gifted detective at work. And Rampo's like, well, obviously we're not headed to the police station. And so he's like, yeah, I see. We're not going there. And he's like, you can ask me anything about the incident, and if you can't ask me any more questions, I win. If I can't answer your question, then you win. And they're like, okay. And so they explain how Natsumi was captured. He basically got chloroformed with the rug, and the guy smells of solvent from the rug as well, right? But he got chloroformed and drug up there, and that's why. Now, the question of did Natsumi become or not become the cat is put to the test, right? So we don't know for sure. But he believes the playwright helped to sneak Natsumi onto the stage to get captured. Well, or at least that's what the guy says. The officer says, do you think it was the playwright that helped? And he's like, no, the playwright was already dead. So Ranpo figured out the playwright was murdered before Fukuzawa found out on the crime scene. That's how good he is, right? He was like, oh no, you already killed the playwright. The playwright was dead before you all went and moved Natsumi. So that's already happened. So he figured the whole thing out. And the crazy thing is, he says the crazy thing is that he was murdered before the performance. And that's what gets Minamura kind of in the stunned phase, right? He's like, he was murdered before. Everyone else besides me is thoroughly stupid and foolish and worthy of compassion. Meaning like they don't know any better. We should be compassionate towards them. So I wish I could have saved him. He has that same, Fukuzawa, he has instilled into Ranpo's mind the idea that, these other people around you, they don't know any better. So it's your job to find the truth so that you can help protect them. And Ranpo is like fully latched onto the idea and that mindset in the moment now, right? He's like, I wish I could have saved him, but there isn't much I can do for someone who's been dead since before the case. So he's been dead for a while. Why would they do all of that just to abduct one person, though? And he's like, abduct? He's like, yeah, this whole project was an elaborate trap set up to abduct the gentleman in the suit. And that's when, and like, the fact that Minamura, we only see his mouth hanging open, we don't get to see his expression, it's very creepy. I'm just going to say, it's a pretty creepy image where he's just like, kind of like in awe of him, right? He's like, tell me where the car is going. What's so funny about this scene is that Ranpo is clearly a 14-year-old. Like, everything about Ranpo in this episode, he very much is his age and acts his age, and it's kind of amazing. But yeah, I love Ranpo in this because he's smart, insanely smart, but the show doesn't portray him as like wise beyond his ears. No, he's a kid and he acts like a brat, but that's fine because he's 14. It's understandable, right? If you're 14 and like a prodigy in terms of being able to do all these things, yeah, your attitude would probably be a little bit like this, right? And he's like, so Mr. So-called officer who smells of organic solvent, where are we going? And that's when he has that nasty look on his face. I'm like, nope. And I'm going to get a picture of that. I'm like, nope. And he's like, you figured it out, you little brat. And now I'm going to take you away. So, And that's what Fukuzawa, I like that Fukuzawa was like, I've had this boy for 15 minutes and he's already been kidnapped. What the hell? Right? I also love in the OP how as the OP goes on this episode, it gets more and more in color. It's wonderful, right? It's absolutely wonderful. But yeah, so basically Fukuzawa's like, what the hell's going on? And the officer's like, oh, well, the one guy has just not arrived at the station yet and his cell phone's off. Fukuzawa's like, well, this is highly suspicious. And we have the one playwright that's dead. What do we do? He's like, judging from what Ranpo told Igawa Joshi, this case isn't over. So Igawa Joshi is the woman there. She's the one, the female officer on the scene, right? There's not really anything about her in terms of being an author. I don't see much on her, which is fine, but we just don't get a lot of information about her. It's fine. I tried to look her up real quick and nothing popped up. And so he's like, if you're going to catch the sea bream, you're going to have to use the shrimp. And so Fukuzawa was like, clearly the actor Murakami and the playwright were just a misdirect, trying to make us think that we solved the case so we'd lay off and not realize the bigger picture. He's like, but what is the bigger picture and how deep are we going? Is it just Natsumi? Is it Ranpo and Natsumi? What does this organization want? Like, Fukuzawa's trying to figure it all out. And he's like, damn it, my child's been abducted. What is the name of the officer who went to the station with Ranpo? Minamura. His phone's been switched off as well. And Fukuzawa's like, I don't like this at all. What's happened to Ranpo? And so then he like goes outside, and I wondered last episode during the discussion. I was like, when he knocks over the sign, I'm like, did he do something to like leave a clue for Fukuzawa? He does. He left a little note underneath thing. And I loved underneath the note. He like put his little face, his little tiny caricature of him going, aha! He's like the perpetrator's Minamura. Find the cane. That's all I can tell you on this card. Aha! Like, I love that little doodle of his face. It's so adorable. I'm like, that's too freaking precious. And then Fukuzawa goes like on an RPG look about. He's like, find the cane, find the cane. I feel like if there was a Bungo Stray Dogs game, it would be Fukuzawa like going backstage trying to find the cane. It felt like a Sega game where it's like you see the cane there. It's like, doodle-doodle-doodle, like he found it. It's great. And then the thing about it is, it's rather interesting, is that the cane with the tracking device or whatever it is, Natsumi has been known to have lots of little tech gadgets, which is kind of crazy because he appears like an old man that would not be tech savvy, but then like he gave Dazai in season 3 the sardine that had the microchip in it. And in this, he has like the different little piece of information, like the data there that could be used to like when they used to bribe Oda. So, which we'll talk about Oda. But it's interesting. It's interesting that Natsumi is somewhat tech savvy. And then we go to the outskirts where when they showed up at the outskirts of where Chuya's whole thing was, and we see the big red moon, the big red Bungo Stray Dogs moon, you know something's going down. Mm-hmm. He's like, I didn't think we'd have such an acceptable gifted on our research list. So I thought that maybe they're taking Ranpo to like an experimental facility where they had a bunch of gifted and Ranpo was going to be one of the ones they were experimenting on. But no, that's not the case. They just took him to this warehouse that reminds me of Rando. And we're talking about him basically joining their gang. And meanwhile, Fukuzawa's like, I have a child to protect. And he finds the cane and finds the stuff and then realizes that he has a request. We don't get the name of the guy with the scars. I don't want to know because I feel like in a character like that, we're going to see him again this season. I feel like that's going to be a thing. We're going to see him again this season, find out who he is, get all that jazz, but it's just not yet, right? And then the one guy's like, oh, well, I want you to kind of join us. So interestingly, Ranpo says there's 4 soldiers with guards. There's 4 soldiers with guns on guard and Minamura. So there's 5 guys there. The group's called 5. So there's 5 executive officers in the Port Mafia. Huh. And if we're looking at the group, I mean, the detective agency has more than 5 members, but there's 5 executive officers in the Port Mafia. Fjordar's gang's called 5. Huh. Interesting. So far, we've gotten the Guild, the House of the Dead Rats. There's the Clock Tower, ones that Agatha Christie's leading. There's the Port Mafia, and then there's the Armed Detective Agency. So there's technically 5 groups of gifted that we know about. So there's that. That's interesting. The number 5 coming up is rather curious. But yeah, so this guy says that they have no intent of harming Ranpo. They were meant to keep their eyes on the original target. And the original target, the gentleman you revealed on the stage. And the gentleman got away. The brass is furious their investments in ruin. So Natsumi got away. Okay, so they established that Natsumi probably turned into a cat, probably flew the coop, but he got away, and now the group is mad because Natsumi was their goal. So it's establishing that Fjordur is potentially after Natsumi. Okay, that's terrifying because, I mean, I get why Fjordur would be after Natsumi because Natsumi is really dangerous and super powerful. They're insisting that I catch the guy who messed up everything. So we're setting up all kinds of things. We're setting up the Fjordur wants to get Natsumi. We're setting up the Fjordur might have a thing against Ranpo. We're setting up lots of things in this episode, right? Otherwise, we'll be forced to follow our orders to hurt you, though we disagree. And I like that Ranpo the whole time is not even caring about this conversation. He's just like, what are we talking about? Is this relevant? Can we go back to talking about something else? And him mooing is because he's like, we have a vision. Do you want to work with us? We need to get this country rid of evil people. And Ranpo's like, yeah, an excellent gift as yourself would be more than welcome. I love that Ranpo's like, moo. And he just sits there mooing. I'm like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, then we go to Oda. Oda was captured and locked up and is sitting there. The moment, it's like, you know what? The funny thing is, you know it's Oda because of them damn khakis. Like the moment I saw khakis, I was like, oh, it's Oda, right? So I love how distinct his character is right off the bat. But he's like, I told them I was bored and they gave me this. To repent, they gave him the Holy Bible. Which is curious because I wonder if any of that ended up sticking with Oda. Because later on he tells, Dazai about becoming a good person. So maybe some of that stuck, right? I think it's funny that they gave him this religious text, but Oda doesn't really become like a zealot or anything, right? So, interesting. And he says, I'm here with a question. I love his blue eye, how Oda is drawn. I know people said in the manga Oda has red eyes, but I honestly like him with the blue. I think it contrasts his hair a lot better. So he says, look at this. This is a memory device employed by a certain government agency. So we see the guy with the claw marks on his face. We don't know who he is yet. I'm sure we'll find out later. Don't want to know. But he says this is a memory device that's employed by a certain government agency that we don't quite fully get the understanding of who it is, right? It says it's a device used by those under witness protection program. So, are they suggesting that Sumi is under witness protection program, or that he put it in there to give to Fukuzawa to give him a hint that he could bribe Oda using that, right? Maybe that's the case, to communicate with the protection agency. Only high priority people being targeted by criminal organizations have one. So assuming that Natsumi is being targeted by a criminal organization. Okay. Makes sense. He's like, such people have one thing in common. They're all gifted. So he's suggesting that maybe Oda has one as well. So Natsumi's gifted. Oda's gifted. Curiously enough, we don't really get Fukuzawa using his power at all in this episode or in this arc. He doesn't use all men are created equal at all. I guess he doesn't need to, but it's fascinating, right? I'm sure someone as capable as you would have taken external clients as well. So were you targeting? He's like, have you accepted any requests to capture a gifted recently? So he's like basically saying, did you get asked to capture Natsumi and you were behind bars so you couldn't do it? So that's why they employed this other means, right? And Oda's like, I don't talk about my clients. He's like, it doesn't have to have been a client. Have you heard anything about capturing a gifted alive? And I like how kind of stubborn he's like, the request may have come from someone who calls themselves V. And Oda's like, I don't want to talk about them. So Oda seems to know about Fyodor's group, but he doesn't want to talk about it. He keeps things pretty close to the vest. And I love that he's like shown in the shadows during this entire interrogation, right? His Fukuzawa's like, do you know what their objective is? He's like, no, it's a ritual. And so this is interesting. This part here where Oda's like killing for money or out of spite. He's like, I've done that. I've killed for money. I've killed out of spite and for revenge. He's like, there was a task and an end goal behind it, and I did it for reasons such as that. He's like, those things make sense to me. He's like, I understand why people kill for money. I understand why they do it for spite or revenge. Like, Oda understands the emotional and physiological, economical reasons why people kill. He's like, I get those, that for survival, people will do that. But he's like, these guys are not killing for survival. They're killing, to them, killing is the ritual. Like, I don't want to get involved with those types. He's like, these people just kill to kill. Like, there's no ulterior motive, right? It's just for the thrill of it because it's a ritual, like it's a religion. And I love how disturbed Fukuzawa gets, because Fukuzawa realizes in that moment, he is like them. He killed as a ritual, practically. He got so drunk on the idea of killing that he just kept doing it over and over again, not thinking of anything else. He says, if you're killing as a ritual, It doesn't matter who you kill. Mm-hmm. And so that's why Oda's saying, like, and Fukuzawa thinks back to where he was just doing assassination missions to do the missions, right? Whereas Oda's like, if you're killing for food, you probably are working for a client. If you're killing out of revenge or spite, it's someone that you have an emotional connection to. So he's like, that's where you ultimately end up. And then Fukuzawa thinks back to where he's at, and he's like, okay, I'm not ordering you to fight them. An acquaintance of mine was abducted by them. I like they says acquaintance, but we're like, we all know it's his adopted son. I mean, let's be real. Do you know where they could be holding him? And I was like, why should I tell you? I don't know. He's like, right, you don't have a reason to. But if you do tell me, I'll testify that you fired in self-defense and killed him by accident. I like that this gets the guard's attention, where he's like, oh, you're going to do that, Fukuzawa? You would lie under oath and get this kid off the hook if he tells you where Ranpo is? What? They'll let you out immediately. And the guard actually seems like amused by it. The guard's like, like the very proud Fukuzawa, who's so like, who's the emblem of justice, is willing to go this far to save Ranpo. Curiouser and curiouser, right? And then he just kind of walks away. Like, that's all he needs to hear. Like, he knows Fukuzawa's going to get what he wants at that moment. So he's like, there's no reason for me to stay here. And then that's when Oda says, I'm surprised. You don't look like the kind of person who would sell out on justice like that. He's like, you look like a much more serious and justified man. And Fukuzawa, he's like, you don't get it, dude. He's like, he doesn't say anything. He's like, I didn't think I was either. But he cares that much about Ranpo. He cares so much about Ranpo and wants to keep him safe that he's willing to compromise everything about his moral code up until this point to save Ranpo. I'm like, dad vibes, right? I was like, Fukuzawa going into dad mode is kind of amazing, but also kind of scary that Fukuzawa, he's willing to compromise for the sake of someone like Ranpo. He's like, and Oda's like, I've always worked as a killer on my own. He's like, I don't work with others. And in that moment, he's like, I never wanted any coworkers or superiors, which is, it makes sense in a lot of ways. It connects him to Fukuzawa, which is kind of cool. But then also, it makes sense why when he's working with Mori, he's totally fine doing all the odd jobs and going off on his own, because he doesn't want to be like in the ladder of the regime. Like, he doesn't want to be in the corporate ladder. He just wants to go off and do his own thing. So he's fine doing all the menial tasks, right? That's interesting. He's like, but if a skilled martial artist such as yourself would go against your principles just to save your subordinate, he's lucky to have you. Yeah, Ranpo is lucky. And I like how Fukuzawa tries to cover up, and Oda's like, I envy him a little bit. They is someone like you. Because this is the thing. Here's the thing. Mori would not do that as a leader. He would not. And there's many other leaders that would not do what Fukuzawa is doing. And so Oda's like, I kind of envy him that Ranpo's lucky enough to have a boss like you. I wish Ranpo would have gone with him. And I wish Oda would have gone with Fukuzawa. If Oda had become part of the Armed Detective Agency and left his life of crime behind him, he would have been alive today. Of course, then Dazai wouldn't have been helped, so I guess it all works out in the end, but tears. And Fukuzawa says no. And he thinks he isn't a subordinate. Yeah, Fukuzawa's like, he's not a subordinate. He's my adoptive son, right? He's like, I've heard of several buildings that they use for their dealings. And that gets Fukuzawa's attention. And he's like, I could escape at any point if I wanted to. Oda's like, I could escape, but where'd be the fun in that? The reward you're promising isn't worth it. He's like, but the food here is awful. If you can get me curry rice, then we'll talk. I love that. He's like, I'll do it for the curry rice. And it's like just such, and his little face that he makes is like that it's like that little cat face he makes is like that in the OP. Oda, he's still a kid at heart in this scene. All I wanted was that damn curry rice. But then he's like, our organization is formidable and flawless. Speaking of Oda's ability, I think it would be far more rewarding than teaming up with that bodyguard. And Ranpo's like, yeah, no, I don't believe it. He's like, nah, I'm good. He's like, moo. I love when he does the mooing. He's like, no, it's so funny. He's like, anyone else might have started sawing you apart from your nails upward by now. And I do think Fukuzawa is justified in this moment because he's like, Ranpo, you are incredibly gifted. And it's not that you did this without telling me. He's like, but don't risk your life. He's like, it's not worth risking your life to do this. He's like, you don't have a power to stop you from getting killed. So he's like, please don't do that ever again. Please. I'm like, I only gave you my time for the sake of our grand objective. And that's when he points the gun at him. He says, well, wipe out all the gifted rotting this country's foundations. Which at this point, we don't know very much about how many gifted are even there. And Fukuzawa makes it sound like it's taboo for them even to be public. So curious, right? Very curious world building. And Ranpo's like, okay. He's like, V is an organization of gifted brought together to drive out the gifted. And so I find it funny that Minamura gets mad at him for saying that because Ranpo's like, yeah, he's like, you guys are kind of hypocrites. That's basically what he's calling him. He's like, you guys are a bunch of hypocrites. You're just a bunch of gifted people driving out a bunch of gifted people. Okay. Like, why does that make you any different than anyone else, right? Oh, and he's like, oh, wait, give me a second. He's like, or give me 4 seconds. By my predictions, you have about 3 seconds left until Fukuzawa shows up. And Fukuzawa going like in all hardcore mode, right? And Ranpo's like, oh, there you are, see? And Fukuzawa, I feel like the way that he fights reminds me a lot of Atsushi. Fukuzawa has reminded me, it's funny, we talk about generational things. Fukuzawa's fighting and his demeanor reminds me of an older Atsushi. And then Otasaku's voice actor when he's younger is the same voice actor as Atsushi. So it's a fun time, right? But Fukuzawa takes everybody out, like you do. And then he goes to Ranpo. And Ranpo's like, oh, just like I expected, you arrived just in time, as I calculated. And again, generational. Just like Dazai slapping the sense back into Atsushi, Fukuzawa smacking Ranpo. And I feel like him smacking him being like, hey, I was worried about you. And just knocking the glasses off. This part is so sad where Ranpo's like, oh, you hit me, sir. And I love that Fukuzawa's just like, he's like, I'm so mad because I care so much about you and you were in so much danger and you got yourself nearly killed. Making these stupid predictions. I love how he says this. He's like, screw you. To hell with your damn calculations. When I got here, I saw a gun pointed at your face. He's like, I was so worried for you, Ranpo. He's like, I was so worried about you. Saying, that was only because I knew you would come. He says, showing off your abilities is fine. And using your intellect to face powerful enemies is good. But stop wagering your own life on your gambles. He's like, I don't mind you using your ability, and I don't mind you outsmarting the bad guys, but don't put your own life at stake because there's people, Fukuzawa, who cares about you and doesn't want to see you get hurt. And that part gets Ranpo to his core where he's like that part gets him where he's like because he figures it out that Fukuzawa cares about him. And of course he's like, you're still a child. Oh. And that's when Ranpo like starts to cry and it's so sweet. And he's like, I'm sorry. Because he is just a little kid. And when he goes to hug Fukuzawa, oh, I can't. It's so good. And Fukuzawa's like, I didn't expect to be adopting a child today, but it's been a long day. Oh, I just love he's like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Dang it. And so that's when we cut back to the present and Ranpo's watching the towers. And we see that Minamura was murdered while in custody. Fyodor cut the missing link, right? Cut the missing link away. And Ranpo's right, he's been silenced. So the plot continues. And so we find out who the perpetrator is of the last incident, V. And that moment you see that skirt flying in the distance, And we see that it's Fyodor. Fyodor ain't changed his costume in like 12 years. What the hell? It's not V, it's 5. Huh. And then I love that he like thinks he sees somebody behind his back, and he turns around and I was like, dang it. He's like, what is it? I was just thinking the cityscape looks different somehow compared to yesterday. Oh, and see, you see the 5 towers being built, that being the Port Mafia. So that's interesting. And then seeing like where possibly the detective agency is going to end up. It looks like that corner looks familiar, right? Why do you think? Because you understand now that he's gifted. Oh, not that. You understand what's important. Oh, that's so cute. I love them together. Fukuzawa and Ranpo, I love them as a duo. It's over. They're the best. I love that Oda gets his curry rice. Give him all the curry rice. He deserves it. Yes, please. I love that. And then he says it's spicy, but it's good. Because I can't remember in the Dark Era if... I don't think Oda liked spicy in the Dark Era. I think Dazai was the one that liked spicy. And so, but he says it's good. And so then we cut to the underground place where they went, where the agency was developed, and they met Natsumi there. Bankodo. And he gives him the cane back. He's like, oh yeah, my cane. I love his calico hair. We don't see Natsumi enough. He's like, I happened to hear about you. So I took the liberty of coming to discuss your proposal. I love that Ranpo's just looking strangely at Natsumi like he doesn't quite understand him. He's like, oh, don't be formal about it. Have a seat. And then Ranpo seems kind of overwhelmed by Natsumi. He's like, oh, no way. He's like, I didn't notice at the time, but this man's really so... He's like, I owe you one, boy. He's like, right, you saw through the trap from the beginning of the play. And you let them capture you anyway. You flushed out the enemy so that we could catch them. So Ranpo feels kind of like, he's like, wait, you made us do your work for you. Like, he's like, you made it to where we didn't really solve the case. You had already solved it. He's like, that's not fair, right? Natsumi's always like one step ahead, right? So curious. And then Fukuzawa says, I've come with a request. I'm sure you're aware Edogawa Ranpo here is building a reputation for himself as a gifted detective. But it's taboo in the city for a gifted to promote themselves publicly. Which is why it's so fascinating. I guess that's how the Port Mafia was doing all their stuff like in the underground, because according to Fukuzawa, it was taboo at one time for the gifted to publicly show their skills. So I guess that's why the Port Mafia was doing it all behind closed doors, because it was taboo. Interesting. But then the government, we find out, is filled with gifted, like Ango and otherwise. So that's rather curious. And so basically Fukuzawa was like, in order for Ranpo to keep doing his job, we need the business permit. We need the gifted business permit so that Ranpo can continue to have the detective skills utilized. You want to start a business. And that's the beginning of the armed detective agency, right? Right? And he's like, yes. In order to obtain a permit from the Gifted Special Operations Division, I require your vast knowledge. So Natsumi can't give him the business permit, but he can give him the means and the know-how on how to get one. And that's kind of why I wish that we had one more episode to show them actually getting the permit and what they had to do to get it. But I feel like whatever is involved with that might be tied to season 4. So I'm not going to complain. Just be like, okay, sure, I guess we'll do this. It's like, I think you can make it happen. If anyone can, it will be you two. And Fukuzawa and Ranpo. All right. This is when it all began. And then we go back, the secret founding of the detective agency, back to the present. So I want to look up really quick. I just want to know his age. Of course, that's been a highly, a big search topic, apparently. It's like the first thing that pops up. Do we get an actual age? Okay. I'm just looking at, there's nothing really on here. So there's not really a theory. Okay, there's not really a theory. Somebody says he might be 26. But there's nothing on. I'm not gonna click on any links or look up anything. I was just really hoping that like you type in age and like a thing would pop up saying it, but the very first line I saw said it's theorized, and then I saw the number 26. So I'm like, I don't want to read any more because I don't want to be spoiled. But so we don't have an exact age on Fyodor. Makes sense. He's like the big bad. Why would we want to know things about him? But if he's 26, this happened, what, 12 years ago? So, I mean, you've been 14, you've been the same age as Ranpo. But, I mean, there have been criminal masterminds that age, so can't judge, but that's rather curious. Rather curious indeed. So, I liked these 3 episodes an awful lot. The symbolism of the color, like bleeding into Ranpo's life and Fukuzawa's life through each other, the idea of the glasses and what they symbolize, the idea of Ranpo always having this ability and Fukuzawa making him gifted and giving him a purpose and developing this father-son relationship with him. I'm here for it. I love it so much. It's great. So yeah. All right. There we go. Fun times. So I'm really excited by this. I think it's going to be very interesting going forward to see how this all is going to tie into the rest of the season, because I'm sure it is. But I'm really curious to know your thoughts down below. I know it's going to be hard to comment, especially if you're a manga reader or you've read the light novel. I know it's going to be hard to comment. I'm sorry. Feel free to spoiler tag in the Discord or spoiler tag in the comments so that I don't read them if you all want to talk amongst yourselves. But I'm very curious to know what you thought of this episode. I thought this arc was well executed. It's hard to rank them. The Dark Era is still my favorite, but I think I like this. I like this just as much as Chuya and Dazai. I think I like this just as much in terms of building that relationship. So we'll see what happens, though. So next week, we're back to the present for episode 4. What could happen, right? We know Fyodor is behind this. It's probably going to have a tie to him. We'll find out maybe what 5 means this season. I am so excited to see how this ties into the rest of the season. I hope you all are, too. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. Have a good week. Please stay safe. Take care. And I'll be back next week with episode 4 of Bungo Stray Dogs Season 4. Bye.